So first of all, what is an anomaly? We had a definition right at the beginning of this session. To me, what important thing in this definition is unusual. These are rare events, okay? So they don't happen to you very often, right? In fact, this is the first time I've given a talk like this. So the first take-home message is that these are rare. I've already mentioned this. And so don't discard them. It's an opportunity. And I'll tell you a little bit about opportunities. And then if the anomaly is a bad event, and there are bad events in everyone's life, COVID-19 is an anomaly. If we have time at the end, I'll talk about that. But I encourage you to look for the good in that event. And it may not be immediate. It may take you some time to realize what that good is, but eventually you'll find some. I'm a professor of biochemistry. I grew up in Canada, and I know there's some Canadians in the audience. And all I want to impart with this is that Canada is not a very diverse country. At least it wasn't when I was growing up. So when I grew up, I basically had a very culturally sheltered life. And I now work in Pittsburgh when I'm not here. And if you've been to Pittsburgh, you'll probably realize Pittsburgh is also not very culturally diverse. So what I'm going to tell you are 3 stories about anomalies that have affected me. Let's talk about anomaly number 1. The question is, how are things discovered in science? You might all think, oh, scientists just discover stuff, but how do they do it? Well, they actually do it from anomalies. So I have a couple examples up here, one old, one new. Kepler came up with this theory of planetary motion because of anomalies in planet positions. He noticed that and said, there's something here. The Nobel Prize in CRISPR, which is genome editing, it came about because some scientists noticed anomalies in bacterial DNA sequences 15 years ago. They could have ignored them, okay? So my anomaly is not anything as famous as these 2, but it's mine, so I get to tell it. I'm a biochemist. I am working on DNA-protein interactions, and this is my favorite enzyme in front of you. Many of you might recognize the DNA strands as these yellow and orange things, and my protein is that ribbony-like thing there. So I won't go into the details, but in order to do my experiments, I had to modify the DNA to put stable isotopes in it. What's important here is that in order to do this, I had to use an enzyme from yeast to switch out these elements. So I could have started from yeast. The upper right is baker's yeast. People use it to make bread. But instead, I wasn't used to working with yeast at the time. So I did everything in bacteria. So I programmed bacteria to make this enzyme I needed. Turns out I got a whole pile of enzyme, and that's what this nice artwork is on the bottom right, a pile of oranges, right? So you can imagine each one of these oranges being an enzyme. I could have just taken that orange from the top and gone on and done my experiment like I wanted to. Then I thought, well, this is a big pile of oranges. Maybe there's something I should pay attention to there. And what I should pay attention to is that this enzyme was really easy to make from yeast. And maybe I should see if I could do something with that. So I didn't know anything about yeast, but what I did find out very quickly is that yeast are pathogens. And so I ended up working on a pathogen called Candida albicans, which is a severe medical pathogen. It actually coats the inside of catheters, and that's shown on the right-hand side there. And the fatality rate is like 40%. So what I'm now trying to do in my research is to develop inhibitors to inhibit this enzyme and kill this yeast pathogen. Now, would I have gotten there had I just taken that single orange and walked away? The answer is no. Okay? Will I discover a wonder drug? Oh, probably not. It's science. Who knows what will happen? But at least I'm on that path now. So that's the first story. The second one is why I'm here. And this is also an anomaly because I was asked to do things that never happen to people. At least I haven't heard of them. So we're going to go back 10 years ago now. I forgot to mention that this is a reverse timeline. So 10 years ago, I'm sitting in my office in Pittsburgh doing my biochemistry stuff, and my department head calls me and says, "Hey, Gordon, the Qatar Foundation has just asked us if we would like to start a biological sciences program in our campus in Doha." And can anyone guess the first thing in my mind, the first thing that came up? Qatar? Where's Qatar? We have a branch campus there. I knew nothing about this place, okay? And but I agreed to go for a long weekend and just check out the place, see if things were feasible. I did that. I wrote a nice report, nice fancy cover on it, all those good things you would give to your boss, and I forgot completely about it. And then a year later, my boss calls me up again and says, "Hey, we'd like faculty from Pittsburgh to come over for a semester just to help things get started." So I was in an adventurous move that day, so I said, "Sure, I'll do that." And remember, I grew up in Canada. I knew nothing about the Middle East. Nothing. And so I got on the airplane. I spent a semester here. I loved every minute of it, including navigating roundabouts. And what I loved about it was the culture and the warmness of the people here, and the diversity of the people here. And I got addicted to it, because I've come back many, many years now to help with the teaching. So there's a lesson learned here. When opportunities arise, like anomalies, even if you're in this shell, like this cultural shell I was in growing up in Canada, break out of that shell and try it, because you never know where it's going to lead. So that's lesson, or story number 2. And then the third story, we have to go back 30 years. And this is the story of my first daughter, Alyssa. There she is in the picture with my wife. And what I want to tell you about is, as the slide said, that this was a very bad thing, but after a while I realized it was a very good thing. And I will tell you it wasn't not a very fast process to get there, and I think you'll understand why. But my daughter Alyssa was born with an AVM. That's an arterial venous malformation in her brain. And you might be wondering what that is. And at the time I didn't know, so I looked it up. What an AVM is, a misconnection between the arteries and the veins. And this leads to 2 consequences. One is that the tissue around that misconnection, the misconnection's on your right, if you haven't figured that out, the oxygenation of that tissue is not as good as it should be, so this can lead to potential brain damage, and so the child, my daughter, has disabilities. The other thing this leads to is a shunt between arterial and venous blood. And so this puts a lot of stress on the heart, because the heart's not used to all this blood coming back at it. So we were given some options as young parents. Try cardiac medicines for a while, and then if that doesn't work, you'll have to try surgery. So we tried the meds for a while. They worked for a while, like the doctor said, and then we tried surgery. The surgery actually worked pretty well, but it was brain surgery. So, there we go. Oh, I got ahead of it. Okay, so there was some additional damage, and so my daughter had severe disabilities at this point. So this was a very stressful thing for young parents. And I want you to think maybe you know someone who is in that kind of situation. And maybe this will help you understand perhaps what they're going through. So anyway, we had our daughter, and we had to raise her, and we did. And it was the best time of my life, actually. Although she couldn't speak, she learned to communicate. When she was young, we used a simple yes-no system that's shown on the left, and then as she got older, she used some digital technologies. She participated in all family adventures: apple picking, going to zoos, hiking on the beach in the woods, and she would not let us leave her alone, at home rather. If she heard of something going on, I got to be involved, and we made sure she was involved. She even graduated from high school. And all of this was amazing to me. Thank you. Normally when you're a parent, and I don't know, there's not that many parents in the audience, but there are a few, I know, you think that I'm going to teach my kid all of these things, right? I'm going to teach them, well, I'm a geek, so I'm going to teach them algebra, right? But, you're going to teach them all these things. And it was actually the reverse with my daughter. She taught me all of these things. So this is what I learned. I have now much greater empathy for individuals with disabilities. And I saw firsthand how hard she worked to be part of the community. I could just see her put so much of her energy into that. And that also made me realize how important it is for people with any sort of disability to be part of the community. And then lastly, I have much greater respect for anyone who is charged with taking care of someone with any disability. And had I not had my daughter and the experiences with her, I don't think I would have learned all these things as well as I did. And so, coming back to my take-home messages, I think I'll just go to point 2. It was obviously not a great situation with my daughter, but after the years, I realized what good came of it. And that's my lesson to you. And I know many of you are going through very difficult times with COVID. The last speaker was just amazing. I was wondering how I could possibly get up here on the stage after him. And I know it's difficult, because in the moment, it is difficult. But I'm asking you to take a minute or two and reflect on what you can learn from this, how you can improve yourself, and that will make it less difficult, because you realize that you are learning something from this. And that's all I wanted to tell you today. Thank you.